I cannot stand. I don't care, I'm still free. You can't take the sky from me.
Welcome back to the Real World Podcast. I say that every time. Sometime I will come up with a new opening sentence. For now, I'm Matt Waters. I'm joined as always by Mike Thomas as we prepare for a brand new podcast mini-series. We're going to take on Firefly, but before we even say one more word about that, Mike, how are you? Are you still enjoying the time off work?
No, reality is setting in, and there's a lot to do, and I need to start working on it, apparently. So that's
responsibilities.
So no, I'm not enjoying it anymore. Now I'm in the final 72 hours of dread of returning.
Oh, well, I just started a 4-day weekend, so good to be me.
Off.
Yeah, well, there it is. So, welcome to our brand new podcast. That should set the tone. If you haven't heard any of our stuff before because you don't care about superheroes, but you super like Firefly, this is the real world. We talk films. Most of them have been superhero-y or comic booky or geeky of some kind. We also did an Oscars podcast. EnterTheRealWorld.com, Mike and Matt on SoundCloud. Check it all out. So yes, this is Firefly now, Serenity later. And as you would suspect, we're going to be breaking down Firefly episode by episode.
Now.
Yes, Firefly now and Serenity later. Yes, that's a clever title. For now, the idea is the pilot, because it's a double-parter, will have its own episode, and Serenity, which, as you said, coming later, will have its own episode. But then we will do one podcast episode for every 2 Firefly episodes, I believe is the plan, unless Mike is currently shocked to hear this and will react in real time.
That was the plan. We've already agreed to, yes.
Good, cool. Everything's going really smoothly so far, and I'm pleased to be here with everyone. So, Firefly is one of the more famous TV shows in history, not so much, well, the content is good, but it has this infamous legacy as the show that was cancelled despite being so overwhelmingly popular. And it's the show that everyone's like, bring back Firefly all the time. Even now, there are people demanding Joss Whedon with his new Hollywood poll to bring back Firefly. And while I revealed to Mike moments before we started recording this that my history with Firefly is nowhere near as extensive as most people's, and I'm also almost not really qualified to be part of this, but Mike's been gracious enough to let me join in with him, and he has, I would assume, a better history with Firefly. So Mike, why don't you talk about your lifelong love of Firefly, I should say. I say lifelong, it was only made in like 2002, so...
Yeah, so for me, I'm definitely not an original Firefly fan. I think I first heard about it between the show and the movie. And so I don't know if they do this at English cinemas, as they do in American movie theaters. But even before the trailers, we get like a whole series of like really hacky vignettes promoting things, like kind of think of it as like the worst DVD special features you could imagine.
Oh wow.
But one of them was a kind of like a piece to get people talking about the Serenity movie being, and basically so they go like backstage or whatever and behind the scenes, I guess, and they explain the whole story of how it was this canceled show and it's getting a movie, and this was like part of their advertising campaign for it. That was when I first heard about it, so that's probably got to be like 04 or something, early 05.
Okay.
The movie came and went. I assume, because I don't even remember it arriving. It was not a hit at all. So at this point, 3 or 4 years in, I still really have no idea what Serenity or Firefly is. It's not a thing. And then I guess I just randomly watched the movie one day on HBO before ever seeing the show, and I just kind of instantly fall in love with it.
We have the same relationship with the show. I saw the film before the show, and I assumed you did it the traditional way so that we would have that alternating perspective. But instead, we get to piss off all the people that did it the right way as we fumble our way through this. Awesome.
Yeah. And then that was all I saw for a while. And it'll be funny because I'll be able to bring up some like misunderstandings I had about the show based on only solely watching the movie. Like, for instance, there's nothing about the movie made me understand that Shepard Book used to be a part of the crew, for instance. So that was a huge shock when I finally watched the show. Like, it doesn't seem clear at all. Like, he just seems like this wise dude that they show up to for advice. And there are a couple other things, too. But, so, yeah, that was my experience. And then one day, like, saw the show for like $20, which in like 2007 seemed like a pretty reasonable deal for a DVD purchase, and at least in America. And I marathoned it so quickly. It was one of those things where it was just like I had to try to force myself to slow down, because I was just like, I'm enjoying this too much, and it's about to be all over.
Yes. Well, like, did you know that about it? Like, had its reputation preceded it that it was this famously one and done cancelled show?
I mean, before I watched the show for certain, but it wasn't clear. I don't think it was entirely clear to me, even in the build up to the movie. Like, it just like wasn't like connecting. Like, there weren't a lot of people in it that I knew. Like, I knew Adam Baldwin, I knew Steve the Pirate, but other than that, like, there was really no one in the show I knew. I wasn't a Joss Whedon guy. I didn't grow up watching Buffy or Angel.
That's where we diverge.
Yeah, so I had no real connection to the show. So like, I can remember seeing those like hacky behind the scenes featurettes on them before the movie came out, but they didn't really make an impact me at the time.
Sure. And
even the movie itself, like, as much as I really loved it, it did not make me go, I need to know everything about this right now, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess to a certain extent, I'm still not that way. I'm not a self-identified brown coat,
Ugh.
I believe as they refer to themselves as.
Yeah.
But, I have watched the show. I've rewatched the show a ton. I've watched and rewatched the movie a ton. I've listened to every single commentary that exists for it, at least back in the day, and haven't done it in years. It's definitely something I would consider to be one of my favorite shows. And I think it's actually really interesting in a lot of ways for right now to look back on, not just because it's good, and that in and of itself is a good enough reason, but one, it's a network show, which in America, like, network TV is vastly different from premium cable TV or basic cable TV. Like, network TV are generally your procedurals, your really what would be probably considered television of a lesser quality to a certain degree.
Yeah, that's largely the same here. A lot of the biggest shows on free TV are like doctor shows and lawyer shows and police shows.
Stuff you don't have to think about much. You can check in week to week. You don't have to think about it between the weeks for sure.
Yeah.
You can skip weeks and you don't really miss much. Like, that's like what network TV is for, and that's become even more the case in
HBO.
The last decade. Well, not just since HBO, but even more so in the last 10 years. I mean, the fact that a show like Lost ever started out on network TV is kind of unimaginable now.
Yeah, it was ABC, right?
Yeah, a show like Chuck, which was not a huge hit, but that's a show that would never really exist on one of the big four channels right now. And it's very, 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 very rare that a show from those big four channels really catches on either critically or with award shows, or at the very least is not able to sustain either one. Like, I bet, like, every once in a while, like, a show will have a really hot first season, but they just can't sustain it because they just have to produce so much content, and it's nearly impossible. So here's a show that actually really does feel like a network show in a lot of ways in terms of its structure. It feels like almost like a dream of a network show it feels like something they would kill for now. But at the same time, it's really achieving the quality of shows that don't appear on networks anymore. And on top of all that, it's a really great early example of the fan campaigns to try to keep a show alive, which they failed to do, or to resuscitate it in some way, which they succeeded in doing. And what's, to me, even more interesting is that despite it being one of the first, what I would consider to be one of the first shows to be really revived, I'm sure someone with more television historical knowledge could point me to something else, it's one of the few that's come back from the dead in any way, and I would say lived up to its legacy. Because a ton of now, I mean, things coming back from the dead now, it's not even something you'd look twice at. There's really nothing that could shock me, especially in that like late 90s, early 2000s sweet spot where I think a lot of people making decisions in Hollywood, a lot of people who are spending money on things kind of exist, like I have a lot of nostalgia for. Like, there's really nothing that would surprise me.
Come on, you weren't blown away when Will and Grace got announced as coming back.
Yeah, God, yeah. And it's that whole concept's become really ordinary, and so few of them are really succeeding. And I'm struggling to even think of one that has, from what I've gathered, succeeded. A lot of them haven't been shows that I watched before or watched are starting to watch now, so I haven't really.
Veronica Mars is something I never watched. I'm told it's actually really good, and I don't know what the revival film was like, but
I think it's probably actually relatively close to the Firefly Serenity experience, in that it sounded like the diehards liked it, but didn't think it lived up to what the show was. The show also lasted, I think, at least 3 seasons.
Yeah,
so
That got its stay in the sun.
Yeah, so it's not like it was something that was just like dead, but it's very interesting because it actually also really takes me back, because like to me, I was a live or die by the year with Roswell kind of guy, and it's like, is Roswell coming back? Is Roswell coming back? Is Roswell coming back? Is Roswell coming back? And eventually, obviously, it did not.
Stupid Katherine Heigl becoming a movie star.
No, I mean, she was under contract. They could have kept her.
Yeah,
It really is an interesting show to look back on, in the sense that, one, it's a network show that achieved a high level of artistic quality. It's a network show that I think would be incredibly appealing to networks now.
Yes, that stuns me still.
It's heavily made for a network audience. If you ever listen to Joss Whedon or read about Joss Whedon's thoughts on how to produce network TV, like one of his big thing is you basically just remake the pilot over and over and over again until you're convinced the audience finally gets it. Exposition all the time. And Whedon's really good about sneaking in exposition.
He is.
But this one, there's literally a moment in this pilot where 2 characters explain why our main character is interesting. And I'm just like, come on, Whedon. Like, people aren't that dumb.
But it never feels especially like it's dumbing down.
It's not especially
or talking
labored.
down.
It's just like he's really good at it, but at the same time, it's almost never not noticeable, if that makes any sense.
But it doesn't take you out of it, I would say. Yeah.
And then, as I said, at the same time, like, it was a huge part of that initial fan campaign thing and revival thing, and it's just a fascinating thing to look back in time at. I'm very excited.
I'm so shocked that... I mean, it's been put to me that it's not so much that the network wouldn't want to make it or Joss Whedon wouldn't have the clout to get it made. It's now that the cast are all so busy, and like, fair enough. But when you hear... I mean, the go-to reason for why it was cancelled is it wasn't doing good enough ratings and whatever. I've heard that the actual reason is they thought it was too dark. And it does have this very sort of bleak outlook throughout. And it's funny that, like, that's what's hot right now. Like, people want that kind of gritty TV thanks to things like Breaking Bad and True Detective and whatnot. And you're right, a lot of shows are coming back, and I think that's been transplanted over from the film industry, where everything's being rebooted, or there's a sequel, or they're reviving old properties, because films became so expensive to make, they wanted sure gambles, and now TV is becoming more and more expensive to make because of these high production shows that are out, that you'd think it would be a layup, given the sort of high demand, like the built-in fan base, the legacy it has. Even people who've never seen Firefly, I bet if they brought it back, they would get a huge audience for the first episode of people, just because they know the name. Like, just they hear Firefly and they're, oh, that. So in a world where that cast is gettable, and now that Joss Whedon's made the Avengers and whatnot, I feel that a network would jump at it, but that's neither here nor there. I don't really remember the first time I really registered what Firefly was. I heard the name, and I heard that it had this sort of legacy of being cancelled and everything. I don't know what that show looked like in my head, but I do know when I realised that this random film I saw one weekend, because me and my buddy used to see everything that was on, called Serenity, when I learned that Firefly was that, like the prelude to Serenity, or Serenity's a follow-up to Firefly, rather. It really, like, it's like the world went from black and white to colour. It was a strange thing for me, because I just had this, you hear a word and stuff, but you never see a frame of it. You build a picture in your head of what that show looks like, and for whatever reason, the two didn't match up in my head, so I remember seeing some Firefly and going, wait, these are all those people from Serenity, and then I was like, oh! And like you, I had seen it, and, didn't really get a sense that it was a follow-up to something that already existed. I mean, there are a few plot elements here and there where I'm like, okay, this makes a lot more sense now I've seen the show. But I thought it was just a really original sort of, like, here's a self-contained thing where we're going to just hit the ground running and you'll just get it. And I thought, oh, well done. But it turns out it's actually a follow-on from Firefly. And then about, I want to say 3, maybe 4 years ago, when I first got Netflix, Firefly was on there. I watched it all. And this will actually be my second full run-through ever for this podcast. I've seen my favourite 2 or 3 episodes multiple times, but in terms of every single episode in a row, this will only be my second ever run-through of Firefly. And I'm doing it with you, Mike, so...
Yeah, that's crazy to me. I think I've listened to the commentaries multiple times, not just watched the show multiple times. And there's a few episodes that I probably skip. And I'm sure we'll obviously get to them, but I'm guessing based on what you said were your couple favorites off the air, we probably have similar tastes. Shockingly,
I don't know how the 2 I mentioned in particular aren't anyone's favourite.
Yeah,
they're clearly the best 2 episodes.
Yeah. And but yeah. So speaking of, shall we dive in?
Sure. I mean, I feel because this is the first in our series, we do need to give a little bit of time to what this show is and who our characters are. We won't do this every week, obviously, but I mean, Firefly, in the simplest of terms, it's a marriage of sort of a Western, and I mean, you hear this all the time, space Western, like Star Trek's meant to be this and all this, but this very much is that. Like, you have like deserts and like horses and people dressed as cowboys with like pistols on their hip and everything, but they're also flying around in spaceships. And Joss Whedon made a real point of saying there would never be aliens, bumpy-headed people, anything like that. It's humans. They just happen to fly around in space. And so many cliches apply to it, but are true, that it's not about what it's about. It's actually about family. It's about people. It's about the relationships. And that is so true. It's this cast that are so brilliant to a man. They have such great chemistry, every one of them. And you'd watch them do anything, would be my assertion.
Yeah, to me, it really feels like a low-stakes Star Wars universe. In that it's full of possibilities. As soon as I dipped my toe back into it last night, I was immediately like, I must marathon this entire thing. I need 500 more episodes of this world.
Who are the Blue Sun?
Yeah, and unlike Star Wars, which has still, even like something like Rogue One, which was definitely smaller in scope, is still tied to this core epic battle going on
for the fate of the universe.
Yeah, like really, there hasn't been a Star Wars movie yet that has not dealt with the fate of the universe to a large degree, and this is basically what's going on. This is like the quote unquote like the everyman version of Star Wars, the working class version of Star Wars, where it's just this ship of people, and they happen to brush up against a larger thing. And makes not only that,
more intriguing.
And not only that, but it's really like, this is just what it's like. Not just these people, but all the people in the show, really, generally speaking, are everyday. This people. Is just like, it's just kind of normal stuff, but with space.
Yeah, I think that's how Joss actually convinced a lot of them to sign on to the project.
And it's nothing. It's really just like picture how easy it is to travel from state to state or country to country, and they're cowboys. But it's space. Yeah. Like, that's the show.
And then their spaceship doesn't look like it's not a Star Trek cruiser. It's not a Star Wars ship. But it's so beautiful. It's gorgeous. That set is amazing. And I love that the actual production was like one giant set, and they could walk through it, and they all enjoyed being on it, and they would hang out in the like cruise quarters, not in their trailers or anything. I love all that about it. You get such a sense of family from them because of the space as much as them.
The set feels like home. Yeah. Even to the viewer, you feel like you're there. You feel like you're living on the ship with them.
Yeah.
It's one of the most distinct and coolest looking spaceships I've ever seen on film.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you definitely, at least in a pop culture sense, definitely put Millennium Falcon #1, but Serenity is really up there for me. And you really get to know it a lot more than the Falcon. And right away from this first episode, especially at the end, you really get a sense of how the ship and everything it comes to represent is really... It's cliche, but it's its own character. The setting is a character. Now, the setting is the fucking setting, but like the setting is really fucking important.
It's the 10th member of the cast.
Yeah. Gotham is really like this big overall character. Like, no, Gotham is the fucking setting, and it informs everything that's going on. But it's a really special thing. Even though it's never perfect, it's a TV show. A TV show is never. It's impossible to be perfect. There's too much going on. It's a really cool show. If you haven't dived into this yet, you're missing out.
You are. I can confirm this as someone who was missing out for a long time, while a lot of people they knew were like, Firefly, 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 Firefly. Now I'm one of those people. So, as I mentioned about the ship being the 10th member of the crew, we have 9 crew members here, which is quite a large number for any kind of show, I would say, especially, as you said, a network show. You would suspect a slightly smaller cast, but you wouldn't get rid of any of them, in my opinion. So our captain, Mal Reynolds, is played by Nathan Fillion. He is one of the greatest characters in television history, in my opinion. Very stern, very, this is my boat, you don't like it, get off. But also, a very good man with a good sense of humour, very sarcastic. His sort of second in command, Zoe, played by Gina Torres. She's career military, and she's Mal's confidant, would follow him into the depths of hell, very gung-ho herself, prepared for a fight. Her husband, Wash, played by Alan Tudyk, Pirate Steve, as you lovingly referred to him.
Steve the Pirate.
Steve the Pirate, not Pirate Steve. I'm sorry to the dodgeball lore. The sort of the heart of the show, really. Everyone's favourite. Well, one of their favourites. Very, very funny. And he flies the ship. And plays with dinosaurs. Morena Baccarin as Inara, who is a
companion.
As a companion, or as Mal calls her, a whore, in his not nice way.
Well, you see, it's a Joss Whedon show, so Indeed. It's actually feminist. The whole thing's very feminist. It
is. Well, it kind of is. She's obviously, her and Mal have a very will they won't they relationship. It's very tense. She is a very classy lady who rents a shuttle on the ship, and she entertains paying customers. Yeah. Adam Baldwin, who is not one of the Baldwin acting dynasty, as I learned a long time into knowing who he was, as Jane Cobb, I believe. He's your, mercenary, foul-mouthed, ready for a fight, always, let's kill them, dude. Will he betray Mal? Who knows? There's
a couple of characters that I didn't fully understand their depth from the movie, and the fact that Jane would ever consider betraying Mal was something I never really got from them.
Yeah.
Also, Inara being a companion, also something I did not get from them.
Indeed. Indeed. And the way that Mal talks to her as well was quite shocking for me. Jules State as Kaylee, the most adorable of all the casts. She's the engineer. She's wonderful. Almost all of her lines of dialogue are amazing. Sean Meyer as Simon Tam, who they take aboard during this pilot episode. He's a doctor. He's trying to keep his sister River safe. And Kaylee has a massive crush on him. Summer Glau as the aforementioned River. She is Joss Whedon's signature, hyper-powerful female character. They don't reveal until very late the exact nature of who and what she is, but she is referred to as very gifted, and Simon had to rescue her from the villainous alliance, and they're trying to get her back, and she's fun. And then finally, Ron Glass as Shepherd Book, who is a preacher, who they also take aboard during this pilot, and he's great for exposition because he's meeting them all for the first time, and he's having his heart-to-hearts with everyone, and you get to know all the characters kind of through Book, in my opinion. So that is the cast who we will be referring to throughout this show. It will come up as we go, but again, I think this group of people, such a special cast, so much chemistry right from the word go, and you can really feel the genuine sort of friendship they all had. Yeah,
it's a really special family just feel to everything going on. The chemistry from everyone is just so great right from the beginning. Everything feels exactly as it should be, and they progressively get more and more. And I should say the outside characters progressively get more and more comfortable and feel a part of the family very quickly in the show, and it's very special.
Yes. All right. So now we can actually get into our first 2 episodes. The 2-part pilot called Serenity, which Fox deigned to air 9th for some reason, and made them shoot a whole new episode 1, but we're going by the intended order, just in case this shocks anyone off the bat. So it's called Serenity, written and directed by show creator Joss Whedon. And just very quickly what it's about. So we open with... it's 6 years after Mal and Zoe have been on the losing side of the war against the Alliance. They are now running this cargo ship the Serenity. They fail to sell their latest pickup, take on more passengers. Shepard, Simon Tam, and a man named Dobson. They're making their way to sell the stuff to a different buyer. It becomes very clear that Dobson is an Alliance mole. He's there to get Simon and, as we later learn, River. And during this confrontation, he shoots Kaylee. And Simon, as a doctor, uses this chance to secure his position on the ship by threatening to not save her life, basically. Mal discovers that Simon's cargo that he's brought with him is teenage girl River, who is Simon's sister. He claims that she was held captive by the Alliance and experimented on until he broke her out. They make their deal despite a big shootout, and then they narrowly manage to evade the ominous Reavers, who we won't actually see quite yet, but they are a persistent threat in the show and a major part of the film. And then, they get away, and Mal agrees to let the two Tams, Simon and River, stay aboard. Would be what happens in this opening 2-part pilot. I don't have a constant sort of working order of which my favourite episodes are outside of the sort of top 2 or 3. How would you place this one in terms of the overall quality? And just as a pilot, how effective was this for you?
As a pilot, it's remarkable.
Yes.
I'd say. It reminds me of the Sopranos pilot in that you get a sense of everything you need to know about the show and the main characters for the rest of the season just based on this one episode. Now, it's an extended episode. It's double episode.
It is.
But you get a sense of that. It never feels rushed. You get also a ton going on that could, I guess, be off-putting to some people. If anyone ever goes back and watches the Sopranos pilot, it moves at 1,000,000 miles an hour, which is definitely not what the show is known for later on.
No.
This feels like an event. This doesn't just feel like a pilot. This feels like a genuine event. The CGI is obviously not great, but it works within the. It just works. Like you don't question it. It doesn't take you out of anything. They established very early on what the expectations are for CGI, especially the space CGI, and you just go with it.
Yeah, because it's not as important as what the human people are doing.
But with that in mind, I think the way they shoot the opening battle is particularly impressive. Obviously, it's just like 6 people running around in a fake trench on a set, but the way they're able to pull back and show the larger battle going on was so crucial. And shooting at night was also a great decision because it really hides what I'm sure were awful CGI effects. And it, when I compare it to things like a lot of the Netflix Marvel shows and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I mean, granted, like I said, I don't watch a ton of action-based TV. I was just kind of startled by, I was like, wow, this looks way better than things I'm seeing today when they need to go for a slightly bigger effect. Or even something like Veep. When Veep has to do like a big political rally, it's such a cheap knockoff looking scene. Like it looks like the inauguration scenes are just so pathetic in Veep. Even West Wing, when I've gone back and rewatched it, aren't nearly as impressive as I thought they were at the time.
Yeah, I do get the sense they spent a lot of money on this opening scene, and it's the first major thing I want to talk about with this episode. So
we probably could just transition right to that, but I think it's very impressive, not just in how they establish the characters or get background on the characters, but also just it feels like a big scene in a way that a lot of shows fail to convey when they need to do a big scene.
Yeah. So yeah, this opening scene, the Battle of Serenity Valley, after which Mal names the ship that they fly around on, it's so crucial to the entire show. It gives you everything about Mal, but at the same time, the Mal in this scene, it's not unrecognizable from the Mal you get from the rest of the show, but he is definitely notably different. But that's important because I mean the decision to open your show with your heroes losing a war is, I want to say, it's a risky one. Like it felt bold to me to be like, oh wow, and they lose just like that. After Mal is, he's rallying the troops and sort of against all odds they're gunning people down and they're going to make it, and then they don't, and it's so like heartbreaking. And then just the way Mal, to me, he feels more. I mean, I may find this isn't the case as I rewatch the episodes, but he feels a lot more positive, a more complete, whole, animated person in this opening scene. Like he's at his best self here, and what happens here it haunts him forever, and like it lives in him, and it's him going forward, and that he becomes this sort of very guarded person because of this experience. And when you look back on it, I think it's super powerful that you see who he was and what he is now, and then you see glimpses of this person shining through in his sort of more human moments. But yeah, such a great, powerful scene. And I think the theme song to the whole show, the Ballad of Serenity, one of my favorite TV theme songs ever. The lyrics just so simple but so telling, like, you can't take the sky from me. Every time I hear that, I think about this scene and just how, Mal lost everything, but he now has, the show now. What we join in the present, that's what he has now, and that's everything to him. And all of that is sort of set off by what I think is one of the better sort of opening scenes I've ever seen.
Mal becomes broken in this moment. It's really this great scene revealing of human nature, where you kind of have to like tell yourself these stories and these narratives to keep yourself going a lot of the time, where you have to convince yourself that something is going your way, and to a certain extent. And it's like, he says, like, the fact that we are here and the fact that we are still fighting means we are mighty. Like, do you hear that sound? That means they're coming. That means we're winning. And you have to, as a human, a lot of the times tell yourself these stories. You have to believe in these things, these ideas, in order to keep going. And the rebellion, the browncoats, whatever, they had to, when they quit, the life was really sucked out of them in that moment. And the shot of him just helplessly and completely dead inside, looking on as the Alliance lands down, and one of his commandees is shot down. Is shot right next to him without him even recognizing it. Yeah. And it's incredibly powerful. It's one of the most powerful openings to a show really ever, as far as I'm concerned. And despite the fact that really, in terms of plot, what's going on in that scene is relatively irrelevant. Like, you can take that scene out and everything about the show and the movie still makes sense. But you'd be missing a lot of depth to who Malcolm is. And it's really powerful in that respect. You also get a great sense of dynamic between Malcolm and Gina Torres.
You do.
Gina Torres is a far more practical soldier than Malcolm is. She's not going to let herself fall victim. She's not going to let herself... she's more guarded up front. But that makes her a better soldier in some ways, in the sense that she could be more practical, more cold in her decision-making, more efficient. But she's never going to allow herself to be duped in quite the way that Malcolm is able to tell himself that this is going to end well for them.
Yeah. And you also get stuff... Well, I talked about how, like, this is an almost very different Mal. He very notably kisses a cross during this scene. And then from then on, he is very skeptical of religion. And, when you have a character that is literally a preacher, that creates quite a good dynamic. And I have this huge book that's like a companion to the show. Fun anecdote here. If we rewind a couple of years, Matt's girlfriend gets incredibly drunk and holds him hostage on the phone for 40 minutes or so, telling the same stories over and over. And then when she finds out she did this the next day, she apologizes and buys him this huge book, which has now become useful for our show. But within it, Nathan Fillion gives this really nice quote about who Mal is and his relationship with the crew. And I just, if you will permit me, I want to just quickly read that out. So when he's asked why he so zealously guards the safety of the crew, he says, "I look at it that Mal gathers to him that which he no longer has within himself. In Wash, he has a lust for life and a sense of humour he's lost. In Jane, he has selfishness. In Book, he has spirituality. In Kaylee, he has innocence. Everybody represents a facet of himself that he has lost, and that's why he keeps them close and safe and yet at arm's length." And yeah, I think all of that is important to look at when, you see whole, complete Malcolm Reynolds in this opening scene, and then we will meet broken Reynolds as we go forward. So that opening scene, I love to death. So, like, from there, they go about their business, and the next sort of major thing I want to talk about is, they take on board Book and Simon. And when they take on Book, he immediately sort of, as I said when talking about all the characters, he sort of unlocks sort of conversations that the other characters can't have, where just him, the simple stuff from when Kaylee notices him and is like, "You're coming with us," and she, you know, she's people watching and she's seen him walking around, and the conversation they have, and then the conversations he has with Anana about just who Mal is and what she does, and like whether everything that they are doing here is right. I think those are all really great sort of human moments that very quickly allow you to show some of like who these characters are in a not overly expositional way.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting character. I mean, it's a very interesting character. I think as for the show, he kind of functions in a lot of ways as the magical Negro stereotype who just shows up and provides wisdom.
That's true. He actually wasn't one of my favourite characters, like, from the film, definitely, because, I mean, why would he be from the film? And
is he in the film?
Sort of my early run-through of the show, he wasn't one of my favourites, but as I've sort of watched it all and come to appreciate, he is actually one of the people I like the most on the show.
Well, for one, I think he's one of the best actors on the show.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's able to do a lot more with less. And unfortunately, I think we would have gotten to know him a lot more as time went on in the show if the show kept going. If there were more movies, etc. Well, actually, no, not there were more movies. But.
Well, yeah, I mean, he has the most... Like, when the show ended, there were a lot of dangling plot lines, and one of the biggest is, who the hell was Book before he was a shepherd? Because that's his famous line, I wasn't always a shepherd, Mal.
Yeah, I mean, once we get through the movie, like, it becomes pretty clear, you know, he was once an operative at one point, or someone of something of a similar stature. Like, this is a very dangerous man in a lot of ways who's on his own path of redemption. But his path is almost entirely sidelined in the story in terms of, at least in terms of where he's been and what his plans for moving forward, other than just kind of existing. And while you get a lot more depth because it is a show, and we certainly have hints about his background, largely speaking, I feel like he mostly exists just to help everybody, which is kind of shitty. But, you know, I can also at the same time tell myself we would have gotten to know him and follow him more. Had the show kept going, and I don't think there's really any question of that. He's definitely a big casualty, though, of the cancellation in that sense.
Yeah, because they were sort of really putting off his mystery. Him and River both. I mean, River, obviously, like the whole of the film is about her, basically, and sort of the final few episodes are very much about her. But
you know, it's a fascinating... It's clear that his presence, as you said, kind of unlocks something going on there. Tension beneath the surface, questions that people were afraid to ask. And, you know, and Ron Glass just kind of just seemingly effortlessly walks through it. He's, like I said, I think one of the most compelling characters and gives one of the best performances on the show.
Yeah, he grounds it, I think, very much. So we talked about his mysterious past. A key area where you get to see it shine through, like right off the bat. The scene where Kaylee is shot, and sort of the aftermath of Kaylee being shot, he like disarms this agent very quickly, and is very sort of... It's very clear he's not physically afraid of anyone so much, but that transitions into this... I think the decision to have Kaylee shot in the first episode is such a smart writing choice because of... Well, it's very sudden, for one thing. She's probably, at this point, the most likeable, innocent, frail character, so we're like, oh no, that one got shot. But it's the way that the whole crew kind of collapses around her. It's not that she's the most important member of the crew, but, you know, she's very much like an emotional sort of backbone to them. And the way that all their bickering and everything just sort of collapses as soon as she gets shot, and you get everyone's sort of reaction to her being shot is very telling of their characters. You've got Anara and Mal both calling her Mai Mai, which is Mandarin for little sister, I'm told, thanks to the
I took Mandarin, so...
Oh, cool. You're going to be very helpful for this show, which features a lot of Mandarin then. So you get that relationship. Jane sort of stands guard on her, and like Jane is like deliberately written to be an asshole a lot of the time. You're meant to sort of, at times, full on hate Jane, and then at other times think, that dude's funny. But here, like, just... It's a very subtle touch, but just having him sort of perched, watching over her, that shows you there's more depth to Jane than you thought there was. Simon immediately leaping to help her, that shows his, you know, his instincts as a doctor, and then using that situation to show that he will go to any lengths to protect River. That's very telling of his character. Mal dropping his whole he has this whole thing of like, I'm the big man here, I'm the captain, what I say goes, and he's sort of lecturing Inara, and then the moment Kaylee sort of whimpers in pain, he drops that immediately. He's stroking her hair, he's very concerned about her. And it's a simple thing, but I think it's a very easy way to show us who all these people are. Yeah,
and I think really with Malcolm and Jane specifically, the show does a great job of deconstructing hypermasculinity and its many, 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 many pitfalls. Particularly, I think even especially with... Because, like, I mean, Jane in particular is just a straight-up asshole.
Yeah.
He is...
Proudly, openly.
Yeah. It's almost like the proud-to-be-asshole type of asshole, which is the worst kind of asshole. Mm-hmm. And then there's Malcolm, who doesn't really think he's the asshole.
No. He often is.
I think often is. And I think their protection of Jewel State is... humanizes them, brings them down a level, but I don't know if the show ever it once again, it's just one of those things where I feel like the show really would have explored their depths of their hypermasculinity more, and it would have been more enriching. Sometimes it comes off as patronizing due to the lack of time that was able to be spent on it, unfortunately.
They do it a little bit here. Like I'm actually quite fascinated by the relationship between Mal and Jane, because Jane's a big dude, and you get the sense if it got physical, he probably would win that fight, but there is that respect there in stuff like Mal telling him to walk away from the table when he's being crass, when they're all eating together, and he does it, and you get the agent trying to bribe Jane and be like, oh, sell him out, help us out, you'll get money, and he considers it, seemingly, only to obviously not. And then I really like the scene at the end of the episode where they're openly talking about that he almost took this deal and sort of smiling the whole time they say it. It's like, oh, the money wasn't good enough. What happens when it is? That'll be an interesting day. And it's just, like you said, like this hyper-masculinity where they can't quite bring themselves to have an honest conversation, but that's just the way they interact.
Yeah, and, there's something extremely negative about men who cannot make themselves vulnerable unless it's to protect a woman.
Indeed.
There is, and like I said, I just don't know. At least in this episode, the show wasn't able to explore it as much in a way that doesn't come off a little condescending. But they could surprise me. We still got a lot more episodes to go, and Inara's character definitely serves as a check on Mal in some ways. So I'm kind of curious to see how I feel about that going forward.
Yeah, and they are very clearly from the off, despite apparently what the network wanted. They are the will they won't they couple. Apparently the network wanted to leave the door open for Mal and Zoe to get together, but that would be silly. It's a thing that, as you said, we will check in on as we go through the show, but I think it's incredibly clear from the start that they have these sort of unspoken feelings for each other, and he is very much... he's being the boy that sort of pulls the girl's pigtails because he doesn't know how to say I like you, kind of thing. Like, he's very mean to her all the time. He is quick to call her a whore. But then when she's not around and he's talking to Simon, he says, even a legitimate businesswoman like her, or I can't remember how he phrases it, but something like that. But it's very much to her face he's mean, but he clearly cares about her a lot.
She is an incredibly nice person and a gifted artist, but I would never say that to her face.
Yes. When talking to Book, he says how Mal's a mystery, but why are you fascinated by him? And she says so few men are. You get this tension when she's threatening to leave the ship if he doesn't let River and Simon stay, and he's like, well, go then. But then when they're all in trouble from the Reavers, there's this sort of touch on the shoulder. And so I do like their relationship. It's very troubling because of some of the things he says about and to her, but which we will get to over time. But it's a good sort of early foundation.
Yeah, it's a good foundation. I'm kind of curious to see where it goes. I think it's like it could be worse. She could be attracted to Jane.
Yeah.
But I do think Mal is not a bad person.
No.
But I do think his brand of masculinity is still very toxic and mean-spirited a lot of the time.
It is, but you do get the sense he projects it out of a sense of he feels he needs to as their protector captain.
For sure, but it's kind of, I don't know, it sucks. I don't know if he should be in a will they won't they relationship with a character that is, I think, designed to not fall into that trap necessarily, with such a guy who is so emotionally stunted, so cruel and mean so much of the time. It's kind of weird in retrospect. They also just have such an undeniable chemistry, though.
They
that,
do.
You know, and that's just kind of like a part of life, is that you fall for people you don't expect to, or you feel like you shouldn't fall for.
Yeah. And
it's kind of,
that's sort of the reason that they fired the original actress who was cast as her, that she just apparently didn't have chemistry with the cast.
Yeah.
And you could probably read that as chemistry with Nathan Fillion.
Yeah. And Miranda Baccarin, like, for someone who got so much shit for a poorly written character in Homeland, she really knocks this one out of the park. And
it's such it's such a potentially very difficult, like, thin ice character. Like, some of the ideas that you hear that were brainstormed for her, and she talks about her initial hesitation in signing up for it. But I think there's
one plot.
Yeah,
we'll get into it at the end of the season.
Well, you see, she has
Joss Whedon. Yeah. Joss Whedon's version of feminism very much at times feel like it's written by a man. Yeah. It's not like Zack Snyder. I'm not a lady, I'm a journalist type of feminism. It's not like that level of bad.
It swings back and forth. Like, I think he has written some genuinely strong female characters,
yes.
but then he also does tackle it in the wrong way sometimes. And she's a great example of that.
Yes. She and herself, like, there are times where, like, wow, this is a really cool idea, and I'm like, what are you doing? But it's an interesting character. It gives you a lot to talk about, for sure.
It does. And I think, in that first episode, handled well. You get to see what she does, and it will evolve as we go. So I talked about, like, how Mal is one of my favourite ever characters. I just want to, I'm just going to try and keep track of this as we go, because I don't have just a mental note of them all I can fire off, so while we're doing this, I figured we would. There are just some lines of dialogue that Joss writes for Mal that just... The alleged writer in me, I just think they're gorgeous. Like, some of the way he talks, like this sort of old-timey stuff he says. Little things such as "them as can pay," "Jane, your mouth is talking, you might want to look to that." And the big one is "you heaped a world of trouble on me and mine." I don't know, it's just, I love the way he talks all the time.
And that, I think that, I think that's not just with Mal. I think that's with...
definitely.
The way they speak in general feels very stylized. And in a way that kind of, not quite Shakespearean, but
you can
they're
see
speaking
that influence.
But it's like we're speaking of it from a different time and place, and it has certain inflections and certain ways of arranging words that don't quite...
Yeah, it just hits
are not quite how we do
funny.
Things here.
Yeah.
But... at this point in time in this world, that's how they speak. And I think while we're on that subject, an important thing to note is that this is obviously taking place in space, and they refer to Earth, the planet you and I all live on, as Earth that was.
Yes. It's gone, I believe.
Yes. The strong implication is that Earth is either gone or uninhabitable. And the two most powerful cultural influences, and certainly linguistic influences, are English, presumably American English, based on the accents, and Mandarin.
Yes. And the Alliance flag is a merging of the Chinese and American flags.
Yes. You may be thinking at this point, so there would be this wonderful, diverse cast of Asian American characters.
No, just white dudes for days.
No, yes. But they do occasionally speak Mandarin as often as Superman spoke Spanish when he visited Mexico in the 1950s Superman show.
Jesus.
So that's cool. But
I do like it. Like, that is incredibly problematic. That, it's all just been culturally appropriated. Like Kaylee wears these sort of Asian styles of dress, and I do like that they slip in the Mandarin, and there's never translations at the bottom of the screen. It's just there.
Yeah,
and when you combine that with the, as you say, the sort of old-timey speak, it makes the vernacular of the show it's pleasant.
It's distinct. It's pleasant. It's cool. It helps the show feel. It helps the universe feel more lived in as opposed to written.
Yeah.
But something would have been nice. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's a big universe. Like, I'm sure those people are out there.
It's a big universe. It's really just so funny though. I'm like, if you really like, the best comparison for it is possible is definitely the 1950 Superman show where he visits Mexico and like randomly says "Arriba, arriba, andale, andale."
Oh no!
Yeah, and actually, I think it's even worse. I think it's actually the Mexican characters do that. Is that every once in a while they'll say something in Spanish, but it'll be like one or two token words that all Americans already know.
Yeah.
So I guess this is a little bit better. We don't understand the language.
Welcome to Japan, konnichiwa.
But it's one of those things you just wish they could have explored more, because it is such a good idea.
Yeah.
That America and China would be these two big influences left. The languages would kind of like meld together in this one certain way. Unfortunately, all the Asian American people died, or all the people from Asia died along the way.
This is true, and I think that was one of the big aims that Joss had. That even the most sort of common-looking, scruffy person would be fluent in Mandarin, and to make the show feel different, and that certainly happened. Just random notes that don't really fit any kind of theme or anything from the pilot. I really like when Simon is telling them all about River, he gets lost in his own story for a moment. You know, he's just talking about her and smiling to himself, and then the camera cuts to like these 7 people looking at him, and he's like, "Oh, right, sorry," and just carries on after reading the room. I think that's a really good sort of acting moment from Sean Meyer, who arguably the least famous of the people in this cast, or certainly the one that I've sort of seen in the least things.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, the majority of this cast has not gone on to like great and wonderful careers, or at least half the class hasn't. It seems like Summer Glau does not act anymore.
Well, she was in that Terminator show. Like this was
a while ago.
This was her first speaking role ever, and that's shocking to me. But
she's a charisma machine.
Definitely, she's enchanting. Like, it's because I think it's largely because she was a dancer, and like that's where Joss noticed her. He saw her as a dancer and some stuff, and then he cast her for this. And she does have this sort of alien quality to her. The way she moves and looks all the time. Yeah, I think I've seen her in this, and she was on that Terminator
she was in the
show.
Cape.
Okay. And
she was in the Cape.
She's in an episode of The Big Bang Theory as herself.
Yeah. Like, her credits last year stopped, so I don't know what's going on, but that's kind of sad. Sean Maurer doesn't really do much. Ron Glass is dead.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. Jewel Staite doesn't really do a whole lot.
That's shocking to me, because she's so adorable in Firefly.
Gina Torres doesn't do a whole lot, despite being an action star waiting to happen 15 years ago.
She's on Suits.
Is Suits still on? I thought Suits was canceled.
Oh, was it? Wow. Okay.
I could be wrong, though. But, like, Nathan Fillion, luckily, had, like, this huge, successful, terrible network show.
He is, like, the guy that... There's so many roles he should have gotten, and it's like, it's all too late now. But he would have been so good as blah, 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 and blah.
Yeah. Alan Tudyk's always around. Adam Baldwin is somewhat around, but he's probably throwing his career down the drain in support of Trump. Yeah,
that dude seems like an asshole. Like, he's a really good actor, but every time I hear him talk as himself, I'm like, you are just a prick.
Yeah. And Miranda McCarran, like, was on Homeland, but, like...
Deadpool!
She's on, and she's in Gotham, right?
yeah, she is. I stopped watching.
But you know, their careers are just like, none of them really took off, I should say.
They didn't take off, no, but you do see them pop up here and there. I feel Sean Meyer, like, I didn't know who he was before this, and I've seen things he is allegedly in, I don't remember him being in them.
Yeah.
But that one moment, when he's telling that story, I think is very good. And I think he does a good job in the show overall, like...
He's really good in the show, and he's got a tough role to play. I mean, almost everyone's got a tough role to a certain extent, but he's got a really thankless role. It's the role designed to be the least amount of fun.
Yep.
Like,
in Book, like, just being stern.
But, like, Book gets to be a much cooler character than Simon gets to be. And I think he pulls it off quite well. But yeah, I've only seen him in the show and the movie, so it sucks to suck.
It does. There's a really subtle moment where Kaylee mentions how she wants to get a new part for the ship, and that's foreshadowing an upcoming episode, Out of Gas. And I just like that attention to detail, that they would put that in here and then have it pay off you know. And it's like, it's a throwaway line, it's nothing, and then it actually is like the reason why I think the best, if not the second best episode happened.
But yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff laid out in this first episode. We get to meet one of like 3 recurring characters in the show. Sadly, I mean, this was a show designed for reoccurring characters.
Yes.
And we literally only get 3 people besides the main cast to appear in more than one episode because it was so short. We meet Mark Shepard's Badger, originally supposed to be played by Joss Whedon.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Apparently he was terrible and he
shocking
himself.
Yeah.
Mark Shepard, pretty good.
Pretty good.
Fun.
Cockney geezer, dealer,
yeah.
Shady man.
Unfortunately, he never gets to pop up again, which is pretty sad. But yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so many more things we could talk about this. It's so good.
Yeah.
As a pilot, there's so much going on.
It's so tight. Like, even though it's 2 hours, it doesn't feel it. It just moves. There's no dead weight. Everything's good. Like, you're in it. You're with it. You're with them.
It's a really, really special show, and it's immediately clear from day one.
They even give you a fancy pants like chase scene with like
that's the other thing. Like, there's action all over the place. The shootout at the end is fantastic. There's fucking horses. Yeah. I mean, there's so much going on in this.
I really love when Mal just strolls back onto the ship in the middle of this hostage situation, and you see it as like a wide shot. You can see him coming, and then he just shoots the dude and moves on.
Yeah, it's a really powerful moment. They get their own Han Solo moment where they have to sneak through the closing doors. Mm-hmm. That was a little cool touch. I thought that was pretty clear homage to that. Yes. But like, if you know, like, you could like picture the image of like Han Solo like having to like leap through the sliding doors on a Death Star, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know, not to spell it out, but like,
no.
They have that. They have that at the end here. I don't know. Like,
it's just great.
Break this down minute by minute, but really, it's great. Lots of things are going on. Lots of characters are introduced. Go watch the show, but 2 episodes at a time, so it's more fun because you get to watch it with us.
That's true. Again, I've only seen most of the episodes once outside of like my favorite ones, but for me, this would be like the 3rd best behind Out of Gas and Objects in Space. Very, very good episode. Very good 2 episodes, I guess. I don't actually even know the point where it would split into 2 because I've only ever seen it in one long continuous thing. But hey,
I believe it's the moment when they open up River.
Okay, and Mal just goes,
huh? Yeah, I think that's the cut.
Okay, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Well, there you go then. Anything else you want to say about the 2-part pilot Serenity before we get on out of here?
No, it's it was just so much fun. I want to reiterate that.
Yes.
I'm so ready to watch everything and then probably rewatch it over and over and over again. Yep. And tragically, you have to now go watch it on DVD or Blu-ray.
Yeah, they took it off Netflix, and Matt had to go buy it on Blu-ray for £10. Not a bad deal. Christ. Not a bad deal.
That's really not a bad deal.
No.
And actually, the pound has fallen so much that's actually pretty comparable to American dollars.
Very depressing when I looked at the exchange rate the other day. I was like,
ecstatic.
Wait, what?
For the audience doesn't know, I'm going to England in 2 months, and I was like, wow, it's practically 1-to-1 now.
Almost. It's like 1.2 or something, and it used to be like 1.7. Oh, ridiculous.
And yes, obviously we'll be hosting a large event in England.
Yeah.
With, paid admission.
Yeah, the Real World Live. Yeah. We should record something while we're in the same room for once.
Yes.
Who knows what it'll be. Let's go see Spider-Man together. Let's do that.
Is it coming out? I don't think it's coming out then.
Well, either way, we'll work that out.
Well, yeah, we'll figure it out.
Exactly.
But yeah, everyone, good things. A lot more Firefly now to come, and then, of course, Serenity later.
It would be such a great stinger for the end, but I'm going to plug stuff to ruin that.
God damn it, Matt! You always do that to me.
So this has been another episode of The Real World Podcast. EnterTheRealWorld.com. We have a lot of written content. I've reviewed things. I've basically taken over the website. When's the last time Mike did anything?
Yeah, my school shut down and I'm looking for a job, asshole. But thanks for making me have to bring that to the public.
Don't just do that. Like I'm not sympathetic to your situation.
Matt's just a giant asshole, everybody.
Yeah, that's true.
He's constantly making me feel bad that I don't produce anything for the website at the moment.
After you did the same to me for weeks.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've written a lot of stuff.
I don't know if you know this, audience. Men have trouble expressing themselves to each other if it's not through sarcasm.
That's true. That's true. I haven't said one true thing to you, even once. My name's not Matt. But I have written stuff, and it is on that website for you to go look at. Also, to Mike's chagrin, I'm going to plug it one more time. Futurama.net. It's a side project I'm doing where I'm going to go through every single episode of Futurama and rank them. So the pilot will debut at number 1, and then I compare if episode 2 was better or worse, until I've reviewed all 124 episodes and have a list. And it's going to be lots of fun. And though I've said already it should be launching this week, it's definitely launching this week. I'm using my 4-day weekend to write the first few. So look out this week, and I will link to the website and the Twitter and everything in this post. So please do that for me, and then I will never mention it again, and Mike won't have to want to punch me digitally. But this has been Firefly Now, Serenity Later. Insert Mike's hilarious joke.
Take me out to the black. Tell them I ain't coming back. Burn the land and boil the sea. You can't take the sky from me.